Hi guys, welcome to Binge Watch Britney. Today we are covering season 2 of The Vampire Diaries. Let's go ahead and recap where we left off for season 1. So at the end of season 1, we have Elena kissing Damon, but obviously we know that this is really Catherine, and we have Jenna inviting Catherine inside where she ends up confronting Uncle John. She cuts off his fingers, and then we have Jeremy overdosing. He had a vial of Anna's blood and he had taken it, and he obviously wants to become a vampire. So we have Damon at some point figuring out that Catherine is just pretending to be Elena, it's not really Elena. And this is very important because Catherine pretends to be Elena and she rejects Damon, and this just sends him on this like downward spiral. And it's a big blow for Damon because she tells him that she wants Stefan, she prefers Stefan. And then we also have Caroline, who is now a vampire. So if you recall, Dr. Farrell, she was using vampire blood to help treat people who had serious conditions that couldn't be fixed with modern medicine, until she resorted to using vampire blood. So with Caroline, we had that car crash with Tyler, and she got badly injured as a result, and she needed Damon's blood. And then we have Catherine killing Caroline to send a message to the Salvatore brothers, and this just starts Caroline's journey as a vampire, and she definitely has a rough transition ahead of her, just because she had never pictured being a vampire. She doesn't really know how the life is. She's only known being human, and so this is just really a rough transition for her, especially when we see how this impacts her relationship with her mother. One of the things that really bothered me during this whole transition of Caroline becoming a vampire was Bonnie's role in everything. Bonnie was the judge, jury, and executioner in a lot of these situations that were happening around this time. She was really mad at the Salvatore brothers. She wanted to punish all vampires, and so she really put her friends in an awkward spot and in an awkward position, just because she had this like vendetta. We see this carry over into her relationship with Caroline, and she's just really, it takes her a minute to get used to the fact that this is Caroline's new reality. We also see a really amazing girl power moment from Caroline when she confronts Damon about how he treated her. This is something that we as the viewers were very privy to, but Caroline, obviously she was being compelled, she was asking questions, but Damon was shutting her up using compulsion, and so we really do see this powerful moment where she's confronting him and letting him know that what he did to her wasn't okay. I know that there's mixed feelings on this because we obviously saw that Caroline was boy chasing, and she wanted to pursue Damon, like she was interested in him. If he hadn't been a vampire, they definitely would have hooked up and stuff like that. And so I know that this has been kind of like a tricky part of their kind of relationship, so to speak. So now that we have Catherine back in the mix, she is really relying on Caroline to help break up Elena and Stefan. She's using Caroline to keep Elena away from Stefan, and she's really trying to like inject herself back into his life, remind him of why they got together in the first place. And a lot of the things that Stefan is using as his argument for why he doesn't like her is that she compelled him to love her, and she actually reveals like this is not the case, you loved me before I even had to do any of that, so to speak. And so I think that that hits home for Stefan, that he did at some point early on in the relationship, he did have these feelings for Catherine, but obviously the feelings that he has for Elena are much stronger. And we do have this moment where Stefan kidnaps and ties up Catherine, and we see that she's actually just toying with Stefan. She's been taking Vervain for a long time, so she can break free at any point. She's just toying with him, kind of like trying to get on his good side again, and then like just answering questions that he has. And so one of the big questions that he has is, why is she there? What is she after? And so she isn't honest with him, but she isn't honest with him as far as giving him the full story, but she does tell him that she's there for him, which we do know is true. Then, because of all this craziness with Catherine, we have Elena and Stefan kind of like staging a breakup. No one is really falling for it, which is really crazy because they just know like how in tune Stefan and Elena are, and they just kind of can't stay away from each other. And then obviously you have the vampires who can listen to conversations, and so they can just tell that this breakup is not the real deal, and so they need to do a much better job with that. Then we have Tyler, we have his uncle Mason coming to Mystic Falls, and this is for Tyler's father's funeral. Mayor Lockwood, he was killed as a result of the device going off in season one, and so um, we have Damon and Mason having this interesting interaction. Damon is trying to test Mason. He knows that something's off about him, and so he's putting him kind of like in these really awkward situations where he's having to defend himself, and that is allowing him to display his supernatural powers. And so he has someone pick a fight with Tyler. Mason jumps in to kind of like stop the fight, but he basically uses his werewolf skills to kind of stop that fight, and Damon is able to convince Stefan that there's something different about Mason. We also have Mason and Tyler kind of developing their relationship. We have Mason telling Tyler that he's looking for the Moonstone, and the Moonstone is something that Tyler has seen before. He knows where it's hidden. He doesn't know exactly what Mason wants with it, but he's not ready to give it to him. So he takes it out of a hiding spot and he just keeps it on him. Then we have this moment where Tyler's kind of finds out about the werewolf curse, and he has this moment where he almost kills someone, so he ends up giving the Moonstone to Mason, and this is probably the worst thing that he could do because right now we don't know what Mason wants with the Moonstone. We just know that he wants it, and then obviously the season continues to play out, and we discover that Mason is in fact a werewolf, which we already knew, and we see him have this moment where he is training himself up in the woods. So his experience is very different from Tyler's in the sense of Tyler being in the dungeon or whatever. And so Mason turns and he almost kills Caroline and Stefan, but it's Tyler who saves them because he yells at the wolf. He's like, no. And then the wolf runs off, and then later they kind of like meet up, and then he's like, that was you, wasn't it? And so he is really coming into understanding what it means to be a werewolf. So then we actually have the moment where Tyler himself becomes a werewolf, and this is because he has to kill someone to trigger the curse. And so we have Catherine kind of playing games and kind of like orchestrating this transition for Tyler. So earlier in the season, Tyler was hanging out with a girl named Sarah, and there was another girl whose name I can't recall, but him and Matt were hanging out with two girls. The one girl, Sarah, she fell down the steps and almost died. This is what caused Tyler to give Mason the Moonstone. And then you have this same girl, her and Matt are compelled to kind of go after Tyler and provoke him and start a fight, and they can't stop provoking him until they die. And so obviously Catherine is really trying to trigger this transition. And one of the things that I really liked that they showed during this transition for Tyler of actually becoming a werewolf is how hands-on and helpful Caroline was to him. Prior to this, they didn't really seem to have a good relationship. Tyler was kind of like the jock, he was annoying, people didn't really like him. And so you have this moment where him and Caroline are getting really close. And obviously, this is very valuable because Caroline herself went through a transition to become a supernatural being. And so, even though their experiences are different, she's able to help Tyler navigate this change. And as a result, we know Caroline is dating Matt, and this causes Matt to be jealous because he doesn't really know what's going on. He just knows that they're hanging out a lot, and so they kind of like have their conversation about what's going on, who she's into, and that sort of thing. And then we do end up having Tyler kind of like making a move on Caroline because he they're spending a lot of time together, and so they having this time to build their connection, build their relationship, and he does want to pursue a relationship with her. So while all of this is happening, we do have Damon continuing to provoke Mason. He does try killing him outside of Mystic Grill, and this was kind of a bad move on his part because earlier that same day he had spent the evening basically kind of like poking at Mason, making different kind of like dog jokes and stuff like that. And so he is able to get him alone after they hang out at Elena's house, and he tries stabbing him with a silver knife, but it doesn't work. And so now he's just officially made an enemy out of Mason. And this results in Mason telling Sheriff Forbes that the Salvatore brothers are in fact vampires. And so how he exposes them is he has put vervain into like the drinks, the alcohol, the wine, whatever it is that they're serving. Damon drinks it and he spits it out because he's having a reaction to the vervain. And so now at this moment, Liz is convinced. She then kind of like organizes like a little hunt to capture Stephanie and Damon, and Caroline ends up having to save them. And so in doing this, Caroline is outing herself to her mother as a vampire, and then this is where you see their relationship start to change. So for Liz, she's dealing with two things. She's gotten super close to Damon, and she's realizing that he's a vampire. She doesn't really know who he is, even though she kind of does. Like the friendship that they were building is genuine. And then she's also having to deal with her daughter being completely changed by this experience as well. Even though we know that Caroline is still the same person, a lot of her traits are just more amplified and more intense. She's still the same person. But for Liz, she doesn't really see it this way, and she kind of wants nothing to do with Caroline. And so we have this moment where the Salvatore brothers are keeping her in their cell, in their like basement or whatever of their house, and we have, I think one of them is in the cell with her, and we have Caroline kind of coming around the corner, and she can hear Liz tell one of the brothers that she doesn't want to see Caroline. And so obviously this is heartbreaking for Caroline because she really just wants to bond with her mother, because previously, prior to this experience, they weren't super close, like they were butting heads. And so this is a moment where they should be getting really close, they should be bonding, they should be talking to each other and figuring out how to navigate this stuff. But Liz is not there yet. She's not willing to be there for Caroline. The other thing I'm going to talk about is how we have Catherine and Mason kind of working together. And so we do have a plan where the gang tries to kill Catherine at this party, but then you find out that Elena and Catherine are linked, and so they can't really hurt Catherine without hurting Elena. And so that plan to get rid of Catherine backfires. Then we do find out that Catherine is working with Mason. We find out that they met in New Orleans. We saw that he had killed someone, so he was just new into his werewolf journey when they met. And then we have Damon kidnapping Mason, and he's trying to get through to him. He's trying to find out what he's doing, what his plans are, and Mason is just like refusing to believe that he's being used. And so obviously, because they have this friction between like werewolf and vampires, they can't just let Mason go. And so Damon ends up killing him, and then this starts kind of like a war between the werewolves and the vampires, because Mason does have friends who come to look for him. So the next thing I want to talk about, kind of going more towards Elena, we have Elena being kidnapped by a pair of two friends, Rose and Trevor. So they end up taking Elena to this house, a really old fancy house. And one of the things that bothers me is seeing these beautiful old houses, but they're in disarray, they're not upkept, they have just completely fallen to the wayside. And so it's really sad to see that. But I would have loved to see these like really fancy old houses in all of their glory when they were first built, because they are a really beautiful home. And so anyway, they take Elena to this house, and what you find out is that Trevor and Rose, they want to make a deal with Elijah, who's a original. At this point, nobody knows anything about the original, and so we know that Trevor has done something that has caused him to fall out of favor with Elijah, and so they want to make a deal for their freedom. And so they end up summoning Elijah to come to this house and broker a deal for their freedom. And so what we have is, while Elena is at this house, she's learning all of this information. We also have Bonnie and the gang trying to figure out where she is. And so Bonnie's able to get a message to Elena, and she tells her that the Salvatore brothers are on their way. And then so we see this moment where we finally meet Elijah for the first time. He's willing to talk to Rose, and then he ends up coming face to face with Trevor and with Elena. And with Trevor, he's not willing to forgive anything that he's done, and so he's trying to apologize, but he's killed on the spot for what he has done to betray Elijah. And then we have Stephanie and Damon coming in to rescue Elena, and they end up killing Elijah. they stake him to the front door or whatever, and your impression is that he's dead. And so obviously, because he is an original, there's a certain way that you have to kill him, and so he's not dead. He's just out of commission for a little bit. Then we see this moment between Damon and Elena, where Elena lost her necklace that Stefan had given her, which is actually a very valuable necklace to her. And so Damon is able to recover that necklace, and he gives it to Elena in this very vulnerable moment where he's basically confessing his love for her, but he then compels her to forget everything that he had just told her. And so she isn't able to remember the fact that he admitted to loving her. And then, as a result of all of this craziness with Catherine, we have her getting put in the tomb, and we have Elena wanting to like know more about this Petrova curse, the doppelgangers, and so her and Catherine are talking at the tomb. Elena is exchanging a little bit of blood for information from Catherine, and then we find out that there's this ritual that Klaus is wanting to perform so that he can become basically a hybrid. And so Elena realizes that she's a vital part of this, and that means that she's going to end up losing her life. And so what happens is Catherine is trapped in the tomb. She also has the moonstone with her, and so they send Jeremy in to get it. Jeremy gets trapped, and then what happens is Stefan has to go in to the tomb to rescue him, and as a result, he gets stuck in the tomb with Catherine. So then what we have happening next is that we really are getting more into Elijah's story. We find out that he's working with a father and son, Jonah and Luca, and he Elijah ends up making a deal with Elena to protect her friend. What he wants to do is use Elena as bait to bring Klaus back to town because he knows how valuable a doppelganger is to Klaus and his plan to become a hybrid. And so part of Elena's deal is for Elijah to get Stefan out of the tomb, but Elijah compels Catherine to stay in the tomb, which is very important. And then the next thing I want to get into is going back to Damon and Mason. So we have Damon killing Mason. We have Jules coming to town, who is one of Mason's friends from Florida. She realizes, hey, I haven't heard from him in a while. And so she comes looking for him at the Lockwood house. And so kind of off topic, but I wanted to talk about Jules for a second as an actress. I feel bad I don't know the actress's name, but she is Lindsay from One Tree Hill, and so I don't know if at the time that this particular episode aired, if I had seen her first in One Tree Hill, because I didn't remember that she was in this show, and so I just thought it was really cool to see her playing a different role, because in One Tree Hill she is likable, but she's also kind of interfering in the Lucas and Peyton relationship, and so if you're rooting for them, you're not gonna like the fact that Lucas is with her, and so it was just refreshing to see her in a different role. And so anyway, she is Jules in Vampire Diaries, and she's coming to look for Mason. We have this moment where she's in the bar at Mr. Grill, and we have Damon and Rick trying to talk to her. She's able to kind of like call them out on the bluff right away. She knows that they're trying to kind of manipulate her and drug her because of her supernatural abilities. And so this just ends up kind of like intensifying the fight between werewolves and vampires. And so what we have later happening is we have wolves attacking the saboteurs at their home. Rose gets bitten, and a werewolf bite is toxic to vampires, and so now they have to figure out how to help Rose. And so what happens is we really see Rose's storyline playing out. We know that she helped Trevor with helping Catherine escape from Elijah. We know that as a result of her being bitten, she's having hallucinations, and so she kind of goes on a killing spree, and they have to put her down. And we see this really genuine moment between Damon and Rose, where she is basically at her worst as far as the pain that she's feeling and how she's suffering. And so we see Damon do this really nice thing where he gets in her head and he just plants this really nice memory for her of her having gone back to like the area that she was from. She's in her old style of dress and she's just really happy. And so that's just like the last moments of her life before she passes away. And it's really important that Damon is the one who is giving her that, because Damon is always seen as a bad guy, and so the fact that he's able to do something nice for someone else is really amazing to see. So the next thing I want to get into is, obviously we have this feud between the werewolves and the vampires heating up and intensifying, and we have Caroline being tortured. So she is actually taken by George and her boyfriend Brady. And so one thing I want to point out about Brady is that he is from Arrow. I had started watching Arrow maybe during the pandemic, and I had never really heard of the show before, and so I started watching it. I really liked the show. I liked the character. I didn't finish the whole series or whatever, but I did instantly recognize him when I was watching the Vampire Diaries, and I don't think that I knew, because when I watched Arrow, I wasn't like, oh, that's the guy from Vampire Diaries or whatever, and so I think I totally didn't even remember that he was in it, and so it's just really cool when you see like different shows that are either on the same network or whatever, you start to recognize people, because there's definitely a lot of overlap between the shows as far as the actors go. And so, yeah. So, anyway, so we have this moment where Caroline is kidnapped and she's tortured. This is really awful, because you know that Caroline is very new to being a vampire, and so she doesn't really have much skin in this game, and they are just really torturing her. And so you see this moment where we have Caroline in that trailer where she's being tortured. We have Tyler coming along, and Tyler actually hesitates to help her. And for me, this is very annoying, because Tyler obviously benefited from all of Caroline's help, and he had just been really annoying in season 2, because I feel like he made all of the wrong decisions for all of the wrong reasons. And obviously, it's fine for him to want to know more about being a werewolf, but the way that he goes about it is really crappy as far as how he's treating his friend and how he's just not doing the right thing by them. And so he hesitates to help Caroline, and this obviously causes like a huge friction in their relationship, and we'll see how that plays out. But what I want to say about this moment is that we have Caroline being tortured, we have Tyler coming in, and then we have everyone else kind of coming to help rescue her. And so we do see this kind of like fallout with the werewolves, because they're fighting the vampires, but then we have Jonah coming in, and he's like, hey, I'm supposed to protect all of Elena's friends, and so he kills all of the werewolves who are there, and then they're able to leave. And so I want to transition into the next point about witches, just to bring home the connection between Bonnie, Jonah, and Luca. And so we have Bonnie meeting these black witches, which is really cool, because I think the only witches that we had seen up until this point are female witches, so we haven't seen warlocks, we haven't seen male witches, and so we have Bonnie kind of like learning a lot from them, because they just have so much more knowledge than she does. And so at one point, we have Bonnie channeling Luca to get information from him, and she almost kills him. And so because of this connection that Bonnie is developing with Luca, we do have her dating or really close with Jeremy at this time, and he's actually really threatened by their relationship. He doesn't really understand what's happening here, and so then we learn that Bonnie channels Luca, and she's getting information about the ritual, what's going on with Elena. Bonnie realizes that Elijah wants to kill Klaus after Elena's dead, and then we realize that Jonah and Luca are involved because their sister Greta is being forced to work for Klaus. So the next thing I want to kind of get into is Tyler and the werewolf. And so we have Tyler kind of coming together with the werewolves after they have been defeated, and he's really learning about the curse that Klaus is trying to undo, and he's learning about the value of the moonstone. And so whoever has the moonstone is kind of like in a position of power. And so we have Jules and Brady really trying to convince Tyler to help them with what they want to do, and so they end up forming a plan to attack Stefan and Elena at this lake house. And so what happens is they want to kill Elena so that Klaus can't go through with his ritual. And so Tyler doesn't know this. He just thinks that they're like getting rid of the Moonstone or something stupid and something naive. And so he goes with them to the lake house to attack Stefan and Elena, and I think he's supposed to keep Stefan distracted, but Stefan's like, they want to kill Elena, they're gonna hurt her, like you're gonna allow them to hurt your friend and stuff like that. And so Tyler realizes that he's been played or that he hasn't been given the full story, and so then Tyler ends up basically letting Stefan and Elena go. Then the next thing that we have happening is we have this dinner party with Alaric, Elijah, and a few other people. And at this dinner party, this is where they want to make another attempt to kill Elijah. And so they by now know what they need to do to kill a original, and this information has come from Uncle John. They need a special dagger and they need white ash oak. And so with this, they plan to kill Elijah. And so at the same time that this is happening, we have Elena who is reading an old journal, and the journal happens to be talking about killing a original. And so she discovers that the knife can't be removed and a vampire can't be the one to kill an original because they will suffer the same fate. And so they find all of this out at the very last minute. And so instead of Damon killing Elijah, we have Alaric taking his shot to kill Elijah, but he takes the knife out. Elijah is still alive. And so what happens is that Elijah is still alive and he shows up at the lake house and he tells Elena, hey, the deal is off. And so Elena has no kind of leverage at this point other than to threaten to kill herself. And so she's trying to do this to get a new deal. And so she stabs herself. She needs to be healed. She has Stefan keeping out of sight. And so obviously at this point, she's very valuable to the original. And so she's able to get Elijah to agree to a new deal, and then he is able to come into her house and kind of like save her. But then she stabs him again, and this time they have him completely out of commission. And so, with Elena being the one to officially and correctly kill Elijah, the compulsion has worn off on Catherine, and so she's able to escape the tomb. So, as a result of Elijah being out of commission, we have his body being kept at the Salvatore house, and we know that Jonah and Luca are working with Elijah to kind of keep everything in motion until Klaus comes and then kill Klaus. And so obviously Jonah and Luca, they need Elijah to be alive and well, and so they do this like magic trick to where Luca basically breaks into the Salvatore house and he attempts to remove the dagger while somebody is in the room. And so I was really annoyed at how this played out because he should have been so much quicker and faster with what he was doing, especially knowing how little of a window he had to remove the dagger. Because one, vampires are fast and they're going to be able to get there and stop him, and then obviously he himself is in a very vulnerable position, as we see in the scene, because they quickly realize that something is happening, the dagger is being removed, and then I think you have Damon who gets the thing of fire or whatever, and he lights whoever it is. Luke, we know that it's Luca. He lights him on fire, and this causes Luca to die back at the apartment where his actual body is because it's just so much stress on his body. And so now we have Jonah really devastated by this happening. You know, he's trying to save one child and then he loses another child. And so he wants his revenge. He shows up at Mystic Grill looking for Elena. And what we find out is that Elena and Catherine have switched places. And so they were kind of prepared for something like this to happen. We have Jonah trying to kill Elena. He's unsuccessful because he's actually Catherine. And then we have Matt being injured and he's giving vampire blood and he just has to not die with the blood in his system. And so they're able to attack Jonah, and what happens is Jonah ends up restoring Bonnie's powers that she lost from saving Jeremy, and now she knows how to kill Klaus. And so what we have happening next is we have Bonnie doing this ritual to gather power from witches who have died in a particular spot, and so she's basically channeling all of the energy from them so that she can do really, really powerful spells. And so what we have happening next, I want to kind of transition to, is that we have Matt learning that Caroline is a vampire, and he reacts really badly to this. We have that we then see this moment where Matt is working with Sheriff Forbes. He's taking revenge, so he actually can't be compelled. Caroline doesn't know this. She thinks that she's compelled him to forget that she's a vampire, and she's kind of like trusting him with information, not realizing that he's actually going to remember it. And so he's sharing all of this information with Sheriff Forbes. And then the next thing I want to transition into is that we have Isabel showing up. So we know that Uncle John is Elena's real father, and then we know that someone named Isabel is Elena's mother, and we have her showing up and kind of getting into the mix of everything. So the next thing that we have happening is that we have Klaus kind of really coming into play, and he, for whatever reason, can't be in his own body, and so he's taken over Alaric's body, and no one knows that this is happening. So what we have now is kind of, because Klaus is pretending to be Alaric, he's able to find out information that he shouldn't have access to because they don't realize that it's not actually Alaric. And so what happens is Bonnie ends up having to kind of pretend to die so that Klaus will like stop hunting her, because he knows that she is a serious enemy for him to have, and as long as she's in the picture, he can't do what he needs to do. And so the gang finds out that Alaric is actually Klaus, and so Elena has to go up and she has to go and wake Elijah and make another deal so that they can kind of take on Klaus. And so this is where we get the backstory between the originals and Catherine. Catherine was supposed to be the original sacrifice, but she ran away with the help of Trevor and Rose, and then she also kind of had a thing with Elijah, but Klaus kind of claimed her first or whatever, and then Catherine became a vampire so that they couldn't use her blood to complete the ritual for Klaus. And so we also have clarification on the curse. It is said to basically bind the werewolves to the moon, and vampires are affected by sunlight and whatever. And so we find out that this is actually fake. The curse is that Klaus can't be both a werewolf and a vampire. He can't be a hybrid, and so the ritual solely benefits Klaus. And so what we have next I want to transition to is just really touching on Isabel's role in everything. So she ends up double crossing Catherine to help Elena. At first we saw that she was basically back in town to kind of work with Uncle John to undermine everything, and then she was also working with Catherine to undermine what everyone else is doing, and then she ends up double crossing Catherine to help Elena. And so obviously we know that Catherine is wanted by Klaus and his people, and so Isabel turns her over to keep Elena safe, and then we have Catherine being held hostage in Alaric's apartment, and then we see this moment where Elena and Isabel kind of have like their moment to bond at Isabel's grave. She's just talking about her transition into becoming a vampire and really like everything that she left behind, how she impacted Alaric with her decision and all of that. And then she, because she's compelled by Klaus, I believe, she ends up taking her necklace off and she burns at her gravesite. So now we have the really big thing coming into play. We have Klaus having everything that he needs for his ritual. He has a werewolf, he has a vampire, and then he has a witch. So originally, Tyler and Caroline were supposed to be part of the sacrifice, but Damon ended up saving them, not realizing that Klaus would just replace them with other people. And so the backups are Jules as the werewolf, and then we have Jenna being made into a vampire for the ritual. It's very interesting that he made Jenna a vampire when he could have easily just gotten Stefan or Damon involved. So obviously I understand that it's a blow to Elena to lose her aunt, and so that's probably why she was chosen. But I just thought that that was interesting when there was other vampires around, so it didn't have to be someone who was close to Elena, in my opinion. And so prior to Elena kind of going into this ritual to offer herself up, we have Elena being forced to take Damon's blood. There is a lot of debate about whether or not Elena should do this because everyone knows that at the end of this ritual she's going to die. It's just a matter of will she die because she's human or will she come back to life because she is a vampire. And then we also have Damon being bitten by Tyler at some point, and so his situation is kind of murky for a little bit because werewolf bites are fatal, as we've seen with Rose. And so, with the ritual being carried out, we have Jules being killed. We have Jenna understanding why she's been turned as a vampire, and she wants to attempt to stop the ritual. So she tries to attack Greta, but then she's killed. And then we kind of have Bonnie come into play during this situation because she has the power of all of those dead witches that she is channeling, and she's able to link Elena and Uncle John together, and this is how they're able to save Elena's life because instead of Elena dying, Uncle John will die, and so this allows Elena to be brought back to life. Then we also have Damon killing Greta, and then Bonnie kind of appears at the last minute, and she's taking on Klaus. And at this point, they have completely defeated Klaus. There's nothing more that he can do. But then he does have one last card to play, and it's to emotionally appeal to his brother. And so the reason why Elijah is so angry at Klaus is because they have siblings who have been daggered and kept in a coffin and supposedly dropped at sea. And so Elijah is really, really upset at Klaus for doing this. And what Klaus tells him is, hey, they're not at sea. I'll take you to their bodies. I will reunite you with our siblings. And so with Elijah hearing this, he betrays Elena and her friend, and he whisks Klaus off to safety. And so their whole plan has been ruined, even though they were very, very close to destroying Klaus. So now we have Stephanie and Damon kind of dealing with the werewolf bite. Damon doesn't want to tell Elena about this. He wants to make amends for feeding her his blood. He tries to kill himself with the sunlight. He's stopped by Stefan, and then they eventually have to lock him in the cell because he is taking the path that Rose took, where he's having hallucinations. And he's dangerous, and so they have to figure out what to do with him until they can actually save him. And so this is where Stefan goes to Klaus and he makes a deal. Klaus, period, because of who he is the only person who's able to cure werewolf bites. And so Stefan has to make a deal with Klaus to get his blood in order to save Damon. And the deal is that Klaus will give Stefan his blood so that he can save Damon, but Stefan has to become the Ripper again. And so Stefan was a really famous Ripper of Monterey, and he killed like hundreds of people. And so we're gonna obviously find out that there's a backstory to all of this, but that's the deal that Stefan makes. And so one of the last things I want to touch on is going back to Sheriff Forbes and her kind of really understanding that the people closest to her are vampires. And so she, as I mentioned, is working with Matt to kind of figure out more stuff about the vampires, figure out how they're operating, what they know, what they're doing, stuff like that. And so we have her kind of going to the Salvatore house, and we have Damon in her cell, and somehow she frees him. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but she frees him, and so now everyone is kind of looking for Damon because he's in this state where he's vulnerable, he's not himself, and he's a threat to everyone else. And so she ends up tracking him down to the grill, and she tries to shoot Damon, but she misses, and she shoots Jeremy and causes Jeremy's death. And so this should obviously be a moment that kind of wakes Liz up because she was so intent on getting Damon and getting revenge that she shot an innocent person. So we have Caroline trying to do everything that she can to save Jeremy. We have Damon taken back home at some point, and then we have Caroline and Bonnie getting together with Jeremy, and as a result, Jeremy is obviously dying, he can't be saved, and so Bonnie is asking the ancestors for help in saving him. And obviously, this is a really bad thing for her to do because she's channeling really dark magic, and there's going to be consequences for this. And so, as a result of what's happening, we have Bonnie being abandoned by the ancestors. We have Jeremy coming back to life, but as a result of this happening, he is seeing two ghosts in particular. He can see ghost period, but there's two specific people that he sees at first, and it is Anna, his ex, and Vicky, another girl that he was also in a relationship with. And so I do want to backtrack to Damon and Elena just for a second. So after we have Jeremy being shot, we have Damon being taken back to his house. We have Elena there kind of like comforting him and keeping him safe. And so what happened is when Stefan made the deal to take Klaus's brother in exchange for becoming the Ripper, Catherine was the one who was supposed to deliver Klaus's blood to Damon, and so Stefan was concerned about that because he didn't think that Catherine would do what she was supposed to do. She's always out for herself, and so he felt like his brother is gonna die. And so what we have happening is we have this intimate moment between Damon and Elena. Elena ends up kissing Damon, and then we have Catherine kind of walking in with the key to save him, and they're kind of in this awkward position where they thought Damon was gonna die and they crossed some lines, and so now they're going to have to navigate that in the next season. And so yeah. So one thing I do want to correct in this video is that I was listening to the recording back and I realized that I mispronounced Jonas's name. I was calling him Jonah, but it's actually Jonas, and so I do want to correct that. And then I also didn't really speak on the fallout between Caroline and Tyler. After she was tortured and they kind of like defeated the werewolf, they did come face to face at Caroline's house and have a conversation where Caroline really called him out on hesitating to help his friend and just kind of really confronting him about being confused and not standing by his friend. And so because of this, they fell out, and that is why that was extra motivation for Tyler to go to the werewolf and kind of really figure out what it meant to even be a werewolf. I think that is a great place to end this episode. We covered a lot of good stuff for season 2, and I'm super excited to be doing an episode for season 3, so stay tuned for that to come out, and thank you guys for listening.